The wind carried the kind of chill that stung the skin and whispered stories of long, hungry nights. Snow fell in hesitant flakes, landing softly on the shoulders of a woman pushing an old stroller down a cracked sidewalk. Her name was Emily Harper, 32 years old, though lately she felt twice that. Her coat, once cream-colored, was now a dull shade of gray frayed at the edges from too many winters and too few laundromats. Inside the stroller, wrapped in a faded blue blanket, her 5-year-old son Noah sat quietly, tracing circles with his little finger on the handlebar, humming a tune she used to sing when life still felt possible. The morning air bit at Emily's cheeks as she pulled her scarf tighter. Around her, the city pulsed with indifference. Cars rolled by, drivers sipping coffee from paper cups, while billboards glowed with holiday sales and steaming plates of food, mocking reminders of everything she couldn't afford. The world kept moving, and Emily felt like she was standing still, stuck in a storm that refused to pass. She stopped at a corner where the traffic light flickered between red and green, then looked down at her son. "You warm enough, sweetheart?" she asked, forcing a smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. Noah nodded, his brown eyes bright despite the cold. "Yeah, Mommy. Are we going to the special place again?" Emily swallowed hard. The special place, that's what he called it. The soup kitchen 2 blocks away. To Noah, it was a place where nice people gave him hot food and cookies. To Emily, it was a reminder of how far they'd fallen. She used to walk this same street wearing high heels and a blazer, holding a coffee cup and a notebook filled with dreams. Back then, she was an assistant at a small marketing firm, saving up to get her degree. But layoffs came suddenly, and single mothers without family or savings were often the first to go. Then came the rent notices, the late bills, the eviction. And when Noah's father stopped calling, stopped sending money altogether, Emily's world simply collapsed. Now she lived in a shelter with her son, in a small shared room where the walls were thin and the future thinner. Yet she woke up every morning, brushed her hair, and whispered the same words to herself: "You can still do this, Emily. You're still his mother, keep going." As she pushed the stroller forward, her stomach growled softly. She had skipped breakfast again. There was only one granola bar left last night, and she gave it to Noah without hesitation. Hunger was an old companion now, one she'd learned to hide behind a brave smile. When they finally reached the soup kitchen, Emily paused outside the door. It was a simple brick building, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. A faded sign above the door read, "The Harbor of Hope." Steam drifted out each time the door opened, carrying the scent of warm soup and baked bread. Emily hesitated, her hand resting on the stroller handle. Even after weeks of coming here, something inside her resisted walking in. It wasn't pride anymore, it was shame. Shame that she, once independent and hopeful, now stood in line for food she couldn't buy. But then she heard Noah's soft voice. "Mommy, can we go in?" She nodded, blinking away the sting behind her eyes. "Of course, baby. Let's go." Inside, the place was alive with quiet warmth. Volunteers moved between tables, serving trays of soup and bread, greeting everyone with the kind of smiles that made you believe kindness still existed. The air smelled like comfort and cinnamon. For a moment, Emily could almost forget the cold outside. They found a seat near the corner. Noah's face lit up as a volunteer placed a small bowl of vegetable soup in front of him. "Thank you," Emily said softly, her voice barely audible. The volunteer, an older woman with gentle eyes, smiled. "You're welcome, dear. You both stay as long as you need, all right?" Emily nodded, wrapping her hands around her own bowl to warm them. As she lifted the spoon, her eyes stung again. Not from the steam but from gratitude. The soup wasn't much, just broth and a few vegetables, but to her, it tasted like mercy. Across the room, laughter broke out near the serving counter. A tall man was handing out bowls, his sleeves rolled up, his smile genuine and unguarded. His presence seemed to bring a calm energy to the whole room. Emily noticed how he took time to look each person in the eye, saying something kind before moving to the next. There was something about him, his voice maybe, or the way he carried himself, that tugged at her memory. But she quickly looked away. People came and went in this place. It didn't matter who he was. She was here for Noah. "Mummy," Noah whispered between bites, "the soup's so good, tastes like Grandma used to make." Emily smiled faintly. "Yeah, it does, doesn't it?" He grinned up at her, a little bit of broth dripping from his spoon. In that moment, Emily realized that despite everything they had lost, home, stability, certainty, Noah's smile was still pure. He still believed in good days ahead, and somehow that faith was enough to keep her going. She looked around at the faces in the room, the old man eating slowly in silence, the teenage girl huddled with a toddler on her lap, the volunteers who served without judgment. Everyone here carried their own stories of loss and endurance. And yet, there was something beautiful in this shared fragility. A quiet reminder that broken people still cared for one another. When the meal was done, Noah leaned back and sighed with contentment. "That was the best soup ever." Emily chuckled softly. "You always say that. 'Cause it's true every time," he said, grinning. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and kissed the top of his head. For the first time in days, she felt her heart ease just a little. As they got ready to leave, the tall volunteer from earlier walked past them. He paused, glanced at Noah then at her, and smiled warmly. "Hey there little man, did you like the soup?" Noah nodded eagerly. "It was awesome," the man chuckled. "Glad to hear that. Come back anytime, okay? We've always got a bowl waiting for you." Emily murmured a polite thank you, but as he walked away, she found herself frowning slightly. His voice, it had that familiar softness she hadn't heard in years. She couldn't quite place it, but something about it stirred a memory of laughter under high school bleachers, of letters folded into paper hearts, of a boy who used to dream big with her. But she shook it off. That was another life, another Emily. Outside the wind howled again, but this time she didn't feel quite as cold. She looked down at Noah, holding his tiny gloved hand. "Come on, sweetheart," she said. "Let's find our way back." As they walked away, the soup kitchen's door closed softly behind them, leaving Emily unaware that the man who had smiled at her so kindly wasn't just another volunteer. He was Daniel Hartman, the boy she once loved, and the one quietly funding the very place keeping her and her son alive. The next morning, the city woke under a pale sun that offered more light than warmth. The sidewalks still carried patches of snow, trampled into gray slush by the steady rhythm of life continuing on. Emily clutched her coat tighter as she and Noah walked the two familiar blocks to the Harbor of Hope. The sign above the door creaked slightly in the wind, and as she read the words again, she felt a small flicker of comfort. Hope was all she had left, and somehow, it was still enough to make her keep moving. Inside, the soup kitchen was alive with sound, clinking dishes, murmured prayers, soft laughter. The scent of something rich and warm filled the air. Chicken noodle soup, maybe with real pieces of meat. To anyone else it might have been just an ordinary smell, but to Emily, it was the scent of safety, the feeling that, for at least 1 hour, she wouldn't have to worry about how to feed her son. "Good morning." A cheerful woman called from behind the counter, her voice echoing through the room. "Welcome back, sweetie. You and your little man made it before the rush." Emily smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mrs. Tanner." Tanner was one of the long-time volunteers, a retired teacher who treated everyone like her students, firmly, but with infinite kindness. She patted Noah's head affectionately. "Your boy's got the brightest smile I've seen all week," she said warmly. "We've got something special for him today. Homemade bread." Noah's face lit up instantly. "Really, really," Mrs. Tanner winked. "Now go grab a table, honey. Daniel will bring it over to you." Emily froze for half a second. Daniel. The name struck a soft chord somewhere deep in her chest. It wasn't exactly uncommon, but it carried a weight she hadn't felt in years. She brushed the thought aside as she led Noah to an empty table near the window. The glass was fogged over from the warmth inside, but outside she could still see the cold world passing by. People rushing to work, bundled up, carrying briefcases and coffee cups. She watched them for a moment, wondering if anyone ever noticed the people who had fallen between the cracks. Then she heard it, a voice, steady, calm, with a gentle humor that felt instantly familiar. "Hey there, Mrs. Tanner. Need another batch of bowls?" Emily turned, and her breath caught. He stood behind the counter, rolling up the sleeves of his flannel shirt, an apron tied loosely around his waist. He moved with ease and quiet purpose, smiling as he greeted the line of people waiting to be served. His dark hair was slightly longer than she remembered, if it was him, and his jaw carried the faintest shadow of stubble. But it was his eyes that gave him away, deep brown, warm, and full of quiet understanding. It was him, Daniel Hartman, her first love, the boy who used to walk her home every afternoon after school, carrying her books even though she said she could manage. The one who used to write her songs on napkins in the school cafeteria. The one who promised her, on graduation night, that he'd never stop believing in her. And then, life happened. They lost touch after she moved away to start college, and by the time she came back he was gone, chasing dreams she had only ever heard rumors about. But now, here he was. Not in a suit, not behind some desk or in some faraway city. Here, serving soup to strangers. Emily's heart raced as she quickly looked away, pretending to stir her bowl of soup. Maybe he wouldn't recognize her. After all, she was hardly the same girl he used to know. The years had been unkind. Her hair was thinner, her hands rougher, and she couldn't imagine what he'd think if he knew she was homeless. Noah, oblivious to her inner storm, giggled as he dipped his bread into his soup.
"Mommy, this is so yummy."
She smiled softly. "I'm glad, baby," but her hands trembled just slightly as she reached for her spoon. Moments later, a shadow fell across the table. "Well, looks like my favorite customer's back," said a familiar voice. Emily froze before daring to look up. Daniel stood there smiling down at Noah, holding 2 small cups of hot cocoa. "Thought this little guy might like some extra warmth today," he said kindly. Noah's eyes widened. "For me?" Daniel chuckled. "For both of you actually. You can't take care of a superhero on an empty stomach, right?" Emily finally found her voice. "That's really kind of you. Thank you." For a split second, their eyes met, and in that moment, the years fell away. the memories rushing back like an old melody she hadn't heard in years. She saw the boy who once carved their initials into a park bench, who dreamed of opening a music cafe someday. But now he was a man grounded and gentle, his smile softer, wiser. Daniel didn't seem to recognize her, or maybe he did and was pretending not to. Either way, his kindness carried no trace of pity, and for that, she was grateful. He crouched beside Noah, his tone easy and playful. "You know, I used to eat way too much soup when I was your age. My mom said it made me tall." Noah giggled. "Did it work?" Daniel grinned. "Kinda. I still can't reach the top shelf without a stool though." Even Emily laughed quietly, surprising herself with the sound. When he stood again, Daniel gave her a small nod. "You're doing a great job, by the way." Her brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, wiping his hands on his apron. "I can tell. Your boy's happy, polite and full of light. Kids reflect what they see. You must be doing something right." For a moment, Emily couldn't speak. Compliments had become rare in her world, almost foreign. She lowered her eyes, blinking fast. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." He smiled, then excused himself to serve the next line of guests. Emily watched him move across the room, her mind spinning. Could this really be the same Daniel Hartman, the high school musician who once played guitar under the stars for her? She remembered his big dreams, his soft confidence, his heart for helping others. And yet, she'd never imagined that after all these years, he'd end up here. Still, there was something undeniably right about it. He wasn't just serving food, he was connecting with people. Every time someone approached the counter, Daniel looked them in the eye, said their name if he knew it, and smiled in that gentle, understanding way that made you feel seen. Not judged, not pitied, seen. Emily watched as an elderly man approached hesitantly, his hands shaking. Daniel steadied the bowl for him, whispering something that made the old man smile before shuffling away. Then, when a little girl spilled her drink, Daniel knelt instantly, helping her clean up with patience and a kind laugh. It wasn't just kindness, it was grace. For the first time in months, Emily felt something she'd almost forgotten. It wasn't love, exactly. Not yet, it was something softer, hope. As the morning went on, she and Noah finished their meal and prepared to leave. She stood, tucking Noah's gloves onto his tiny hands, when Daniel's voice called from behind. "Hey, wait a sec." She turned, startled. He walked over, wiping his hands on a towel. "We're short a few helpers tomorrow morning. If you're free, we could use an extra pair of hands." Emily blinked. "You mean volunteer?" "Yeah, you'd be surprised how much it lifts the spirits. And you'd get breakfast and lunch, of course." She hesitated, torn between embarrassment and gratitude, then she nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." "Good," he said, smiling. "We start at 9. As Emily and Noah stepped back into the cold, she turned once more to glance through the window. Daniel was back at the counter, laughing with a group of volunteers, his breath visible in the faint chill of the air. And though she didn't know it yet, that single invitation, to come back and help, would become the first step toward changing everything. The next morning dawned gray and uncertain, but inside Emily's heart, something small and bright had begun to stir. For the first time in a long while, she didn't wake up dreading the day ahead. The shelter was already buzzing when she rose from her cot, mothers packing up their things, children yawning, volunteers tidying up breakfast trays. Noah was still asleep, curled under his thin blanket, his small hand clutching the stuffed bear she'd rescued from a thrift store months ago. She brushed a hand through his hair and whispered, "We've got a big day today, buddy." By the time they reached the Harbor of Hope, a golden strip of sunlight had pushed through the clouds. Emily's nerves buzzed with both excitement and fear. She'd agreed, almost impulsively, the day before to come back and volunteer. It had felt like a chance to do something meaningful again, even if it was just washing dishes or folding napkins. But beneath that, she knew the truth: she wanted to see Daniel again. Inside, the soup kitchen was quieter than usual. Volunteers were just arriving, setting up trays, preparing the soup pots. The smell of coffee drifted through the air, comforting and strong. Daniel stood near the counter, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand, greeting each person as they came in. He looked up the moment she entered and smiled. "You made it," he said warmly. Emily smiled back, shy but sincere. "Yeah. I figured I'd try to be useful for once." Daniel chuckled. "Trust me, around here, everyone's useful. Come on, I'll show you what to do." He led her to the kitchen, where steam rose from enormous metal pots simmering on the stoves. The sound of clattering spoons, sizzling onions, and soft laughter filled the room. "You can help with the bread line today," Daniel said, handing her a pair of gloves. "Just butter the slices and hand them out with the soup. Easy stuff." Emily nodded, grateful for the simplicity of the task. She worked quietly, her hands moving steadily while Daniel coordinated the rest of the volunteers. Every now and then, their eyes met across the room, and he'd give her an encouraging nod. As the first wave of guests arrived, Emily's nervousness eased. There was something grounding about serving others, something almost healing. She handed out bowls of soup to men and women who thanked her softly, their eyes tired but kind. And each "thank you" felt like a balm to her own weary heart. Hours passed quickly. By the time the last bowls were served, her back ached, but she didn't mind. She hadn't felt this alive in months. When the rush was finally over, Daniel clapped his hands together. "All right, team, take 5. Coffee's on the table." Emily poured herself a cup and stepped outside for some air. The afternoon sun had broken through, melting the last patches of snow. She stood on the back steps, sipping slowly, watching the light dance across the puddles. "Mind if I join you?" She turned. Daniel stood in the doorway, holding his own mug. He sat beside her, the wood creaking under their weight. For a few moments, they sat in companionable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said finally. "Most people don't come back to volunteer after what they've been through." Emily looked down at her hands. "Maybe I needed to remember that I still have something to give." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's powerful. A lot of people forget that. How giving can heal you." They sat quietly again, the hum of the city faint in the background. Then Daniel glanced at her with a half smile. "Can I ask something?" "Sure. What's your story, Emily?" She hesitated. The question hung heavy between them. It had been so long since anyone had asked, not out of pity, but genuine curiosity. She could have deflected, kept it vague. But something in his eyes made her want to tell the truth. "I used to work in marketing," she began softly. "Small firm downtown. Nothing fancy, but I liked it. I thought I was building something for me and Noah. Then layoffs came. I thought I'd find another job quickly, but things spiraled faster than I expected. Rent went up, bills piled up. I tried everything, temp work, night shifts, but it wasn't enough." Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression calm but deeply empathetic. She took a deep breath. "Eventually, we lost the apartment. I told Noah it was just a short break, that we were having an adventure. But the truth was we were homeless. We've been staying at the women's shelter for 3 months now." Her voice cracked, and she quickly looked away. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this." Daniel shook his head gently. "Don't apologize. You don't owe me anything. I asked because sometimes people just need to be heard." The warmth in his tone disarmed her. She blinked back, tears exhaling slowly. "You know, I used to think I'd never end up like this. But life doesn't really care about your plans." He smiled faintly. "No, it doesn't. But it also has a way of surprising you when you least expect it." Emily gave a small laugh. "You sound like someone who's been through a few surprises himself." Daniel took a sip of coffee, looking off toward the horizon. "You could say that. I grew up not far from here. My mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us fed. We used to come to a place like this sometimes when things got bad." He paused, his voice softening. "That's actually why I started volunteering. I wanted to give people what I was given. A place that reminds you you're not alone." His words lingered in the air, gentle yet powerful. Emily turned to look at him fully then, and something inside her shifted. For so long she had carried the weight of shame and isolation. But in Daniel's quiet understanding she felt seen, not as a failure, but as a human being still worthy of dignity. "Thank you," she said finally, "for this place, for this moment." He smiled. "You don't need to thank me. Just keep showing up. That's the hardest part, and you're already doing it." They sat there until the sun began to sink, turning the sky into a wash of gold and rose. Noah's laughter drifted from inside, where Miss Tanner was giving him an extra cookie. The sound made Emily smile, her chest tightening with love. As they stood to go, Daniel turned to her. "You know, I can help you find work if you want. Nothing big, but maybe something steady. We partner with a few local businesses that hire from our volunteer program." Her eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "Of course. Everyone deserves a shot at getting back on their feet." For a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. Gratitude swelled in her throat, tangled with disbelief. I'd really appreciate that," she whispered. Daniel nodded, his gaze kind but steady. "We'll figure it out together." As she walked away that evening, hand in hand with Noah, Emily's heart felt lighter than it had in years. She didn't know where this new path would lead, but for the first time, she believed it might lead somewhere good. Behind her, Daniel watched from the doorway, his eyes following her until she disappeared into the dusky light. He smiled softly to himself, whispering, "You always did have more strength than you realized, Emily." And though she didn't know it yet, that quiet promise, to help her rebuild, was not just an act of kindness. It was the beginning of something much deeper, a rediscovery of the love they both thought life had taken away. The week passed in a blur of motion and quiet gratitude. Emily found herself returning to the harbor of hope every morning, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Something about the rhythm of serving others, washing dishes, pouring soup, handing out smiles, made her feel alive again. Each day, she stood a little straighter, laughed a little easier, and carried herself with the dignity she thought she had lost. Noah came along sometimes, spending hours drawing pictures for the volunteers or handing out napkins to the guests. Everyone adored him. Mrs. Tanner said he brought sunshine into the room, and Daniel, Well, Daniel always had a moment to kneel beside him, joke with him, or listen to his latest adventure story. Emily often caught herself watching Daniel when he wasn't looking. He carried himself differently than most people she'd met, humble, grounded, yet with an aura of quiet purpose. He worked side by side with everyone, never acting like he was in charge, even though it was obvious that others looked to him for direction. She'd often wondered what had led him here, why a man who seemed so capable, so put together, had chosen to spend his days serving strangers. It was on a Friday morning when she finally got her answer. The day had started like any other. Snow fell lightly outside, softening the sounds of the city. Inside the kitchen, the air buzzed with warmth and the scent of fresh bread. Daniel had asked Emily to help organize the supply room, and she'd agreed happily. It was quieter work, a small pocket of peace amidst the daily bustle. The supply room was tucked in the back of the building, filled with stacks of canned goods, boxes of pasta, and labeled bins of donated clothing. Emily tied her hair up, humming softly as she sorted through the shelves. Her hands worked quickly, organizing cans by expiration date and stacking them neatly. For the first time in months, useful, she was halfway through unpacking a new box of donations when she heard voices just outside the door. 2 volunteers, Tom and Sarah, were chatting in low tones, unaware that anyone else was inside. "I still can't believe he funds this whole place himself," Tom said, his voice full of awe. Emily froze, her hand still holding a can of beans. Sarah chuckled softly. "Yeah, I know. He never talks about it though, doesn't even want his name on the sign. Most people think this is just a regular charity. Daniel's something else," Tom said. "He told me once he started this after his mom passed. Said she used to bring him to soup kitchens when they had nothing. Guess this is his way of giving back." Emily's heart began to race. Daniel funds the entire place. She stood still for a long moment, the weight of that revelation sinking in. The man who spent his mornings mopping floors and serving soup wasn't just a volunteer, he was the reason any of this existed. The meals, the warmth, the shelter, all of it. She tried to steady her breath. Pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. The way he always stayed late after everyone left, double-checking supplies. The way the other volunteers seemed to look up to him with quiet respect. The clipboard he carried, the keys to every door. And yet he'd never mentioned it. Not once. Emily set down the can gently, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't know if she felt more shocked or moved. When she finally stepped out of the storage room, Daniel was there, standing by the hallway. He smiled when he saw her. "Hey, how's the inventory coming?" She opened her mouth, but the words tangled on her tongue. It's fine, everything's stocked." He nodded, oblivious to the storm brewing behind her eyes. "Great, you've been a huge help lately, Emily. Really, we couldn't do half of this without you." Her throat tightened. She thought. "You mean without you?" Later that day, after the lunch rush ended and most of the volunteers had gone home, Emily stayed behind. She told herself she needed to finish restocking, but the truth was, she couldn't leave without asking him, without knowing. She found him sitting alone in the main hall, the sunlight from the high window spilling across the wooden tables. He was holding a cup of coffee, staring into it as though lost in thought. "Daniel," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes lighting with that easy warmth she'd come to recognize. "Hey, I thought you'd gone home. I wanted to talk to you," she said. Her voice wavered, and she hated how small it sounded. "Can I ask you something personal?" He set down his cup, sensing the shift in her tone. "Of course." She hesitated for a long moment. Then, finally, "Is it true that you fund this place?" Daniel blinked, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he sighed softly, leaning back in his chair. "I see you found out," he said quietly. Emily felt her chest tighten. "Why didn't you tell me? Why don't you tell anyone?" He smiled faintly, a little sad. "Because it's not about me, Emily. This place was never meant to be a monument to anyone. It's about people helping people. About dignity, about second chances." He looked down, fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "When I was a kid, my mom and I used to come to places like this. We were broke, sometimes homeless. But the people here never made us feel lesser. They treated us like family. My mom used to say, kindness is the one meal the world will never run out of." After she passed, I promised myself I'd build a place that made others feel the way we once did, safe, seen, human. Emily's eyes glistened. "That's incredible," she whispered. He shrugged, almost embarrassed. "I just had the means to make it happen, that's all. The real magic comes from everyone who shows up. People like you." She shook her head slowly, tears welling up. "You don't understand, Daniel. You didn't just give people food. You gave me hope. You gave Noah a place to smile again, and you never even told me." He looked at her then, really looked at her. His voice softened. "You helped me too, you know." She frowned slightly. How?" Daniel's gaze turned distant, reflective. "You don't remember, do you? Senior year, after my dad left, I was ready to drop out, give up everything. You were the one who told me I could still make something of myself. You believed in me when no one else did." Her heart skipped. The memory came rushing back. Sitting on the old football bleachers, his head in his hands, her hand resting over his, she had told him he was meant for something good, something bigger. She hadn't realized those words had ever stayed with him. So, he said, smiling gently, this place in a way, it's because of you too. The tears she'd been holding back finally slipped free. Daniel, she whispered. He stood and reached for her hand, his touch warm, grounding. Don't cry, Emily, you've been through enough tears. This is the good part, the rebuilding part. For the first time in years, she didn't feel ashamed of where she'd been. Instead, she felt something like peace. Standing there, hand in hand with the boy who had once believed in her, and the man who had quietly saved her life, Emily realized that sometimes kindness doesn't come full circle, it comes home. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the first light of sunset spilled across the soup kitchen's windows, painting the room in gold. It was as if the whole world had paused to honor that quiet moment of truth between two hearts that had found their way back, not through luck, but through grace. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both felt it. The sense that this was not the end of something, but the beginning of everything new. The next morning dawned brighter than any Emily had seen in a long time. The sunlight slipped through the curtains of the small shelter room she and Noah shared, painting golden stripes on the floor. For the first time in months, she woke up not to fear or exhaustion, but to the sound of her son's soft laughter. Noah was sitting cross-legged on the bed, drawing on a piece of scrap paper with a broken crayon. His picture showed a smiling stick figure next to a tall man holding a pot of soup, with the words Mr. Daniel's Kitchen scribbled across the top. Emily smiled through a wave of warmth. That's beautiful, sweetheart. It's for Mr. Daniel, Noah said proudly. He said I could hang it on the wall in the dining room. Emily's heart ached in the best way. Just a few weeks ago Noah had been shy, quiet, scared to talk to anyone. Now he was laughing again, drawing again, living again. She brushed a strand of hair from his face and whispered, "You're doing amazing, baby." By noon the soup kitchen was alive with the usual hum of activity. Volunteers moved like a small orchestra, serving, chopping, greeting guests by name. The clatter of dishes mixed with bursts of laughter and the warm scent of bread and chicken stew. Emily stood behind the counter, ladling soup with her apron tied snugly around her waist. Each smile she offered, each bowl she filled, carried a quiet power. These were no longer acts of survival, they were acts of purpose. When Daniel walked in, the atmosphere seemed to brighten even more. He wasn't wearing his usual coat that day, just a simple blue sweater and that calm, steady smile that seemed to ground everyone around him. "Morning, everyone," he greeted. "Let's make today a good one." "Every day's a good one when you're here, Daniel," Mrs. Tanner teased from the corner. Laughter rippled through the room, and Emily found herself joining in. But when her eyes met his across the counter, something wordless passed between them. Gratitude, understanding, something deeper still, like two souls recognizing each other again after being lost in the crowd for years. As the lunch rush ended, Emily noticed a commotion near the doorway. A local reporter and photographer had come by, asking to do a small feature about the soup kitchen. They wanted to highlight the Harbor of Hope's impact on the community. Daniel looked uneasy. "I'd rather the story focus on the volunteers," he told them politely. "This isn't about me." But Mrs. Tanner, ever the persistent one, nudged him with a grin. "Don't be so humble. You're the reason half this neighborhood eats, young man. Let people know what good looks like." Emily chuckled softly. It was classic Daniel, kind enough to feed hundreds, humble enough to avoid credit. The reporter, sensing his modesty, decided to interview some of the volunteers instead, and when she turned to Emily, she froze for a second, caught off guard by the glow in the young mother's eyes, the resilience etched in her posture. "What brought you here?" the reporter asked gently, adjusting her recorder. Emily hesitated for a moment, then spoke with quiet honesty. "Hard times," she said. "I lost my job, my apartment, I thought I'd lost myself too. But then I came here and I found kindness again. I found hope. People didn't treat me like a burden, they treated me like family. This place," she paused, her throat tightening. "This place saved me." The room grew still. Even the clatter of dishes seemed to fade. Daniel looked at her, his eyes soft and shining. The reporter smiled warmly. "That's a beautiful story, Emily. Thank you for sharing that." Emily looked down, cheeks flushing. "If this story helps even one person walk through those doors instead of giving up, then it's worth it." When the reporter left, Daniel came over, leaning against the counter beside her. "You did great," he said quietly. She laughed nervously. "I probably sounded like I was about to cry." "That's what made it real," he replied. "You reminded everyone why this place matters." Emily looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "No, Daniel, you reminded us." For a long moment they just stood there, surrounded by the soft hum of the kitchen, the smell of bread, the echo of laughter. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "Listen, I've been thinking. There's an opening for a part-time coordinator here, someone to help manage volunteers, keep track of supplies, plan meal schedules. It's paid and, I think you'd be perfect for it. Emily blinked. Me, he nodded. You've already been doing half the job without realizing it. The tears welled in her eyes. Daniel, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said with a small smile. You deserve a fresh start, Emily. Let this be it. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt her heart swell not with fear, but with hope. Yes, she whispered, smiling through her tears. I'd love that. Noah came running up at that exact moment, holding his drawing high in the air. Mr. Daniel, look, I finished it. Daniel crouched down, examining the picture as though it were a priceless painting. This is amazing, buddy, he said, ruffling Noah's hair. You've even got the soup pot right. Mom helped, Noah said proudly. Daniel glanced up at her with a soft smile. I bet she did. A few weeks later, the soup kitchen was buzzing with more energy than ever before. Donations increased after the local story aired, and more volunteers joined their ranks. The walls were brighter, the tables fuller, and on one of those walls right near the entrance, hung Noah's drawing, framed, surrounded by photos of smiling faces. Emily stood beneath it one afternoon, watching as Daniel laughed with a group of new volunteers. The man who once seemed like a chapter from her past had become the cornerstone of her present. As he turned toward her, their eyes met, and she realized that love didn't always come wrapped in grand gestures. Sometimes it came in bowls of soup, in quiet kindness, in the act of showing up again and again. When Daniel walked over, she didn't look away this time. Funny, she said, smiling softly. A few months ago, I was standing in line for food, now I'm helping serve it. He smiled back. Life's full of second chances, Emily. Sometimes they taste a little like chicken soup. They both laughed, and for a moment, the world felt impossibly light. Later that evening, as the last guests left and the lights dimmed, Daniel locked the doors. He turned to Emily, his voice quiet but certain. You know, he said, I always thought I started this kitchen to help others. But now I think it helped me find what I'd lost too. Emily tilted her head. What's that? He smiled gently. Someone who reminded me what kindness looks like. She blushed, her heart fluttering. I think we both found that, Daniel. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the night sky. Snowflakes drifted down again, but this time they didn't seem cold. They sparkled, like tiny promises falling from heaven, reminding her that love, in its purest form, often hides behind the simplest acts of grace. And as Emily stepped outside with Noah's hand in hers, Daniel walking beside them, she realized something beautiful. She had walked into the soup kitchen looking for food. But what she found there was far more nourishing. A home, a purpose, and the kind of love that quietly changes everything.